John Quincy Adams was the 6th president of the United States until Andrew Jackson was like,
"Get out, I'm president now."
After he left, he served as a U.S. representative in Massachusetts for a while until he shriveled up and died. He also didn't like slavery that much. He was also an envoy and minister to places like the Netherlands and Prussia. He felt that presidents could end slavery with their super awesome President Sharingan executive powers. He also had nice sideburn. John C. Calhoun was a U.S. representative and senator from South Carolina who wanted to be president, but got second place, which isn't that bad. He strongly believed that states should decide whether to follow federal laws themselves, which caused the nullification crisis that eventually ended up in the Civil War and the deaths of hundreds and thousands of people, but whatever. Henry Clay liked to wear wigs. He was part of the Whig Party. He was a Kentucky senator and the 7th Speaker of the House. He also used his power as the Speaker to persuade his fellow House members to not vote for Andrew Jackson during the election of 1824. He had a sweet nickname of the Great Compromiser, because he compromised issues that needed compromising and created compromises that tested the nation as a whole, such as the Compromise of 1850 and the Missouri Compromise. He also created the American system, which was made to improve roads and canals so people could get where they need to be. Daniel Webster was pretty much useless. He was a senator from Massachusetts and also hated black people. Wait, never mind. He hated slavery. Whoops. He was best known for wanting to preserve the Union and fight nullification, and also saying this:
"Liberty and union, now and forever, one and inseparable."
Harriet B Stowe wrote a book. It showed how cruel slavery was and made people read it and go, oh crap, slavery isn't really that great. She didn't only care about slavery, though. She also wanted religious and gender equality. But no one cares about her efforts over there. Frederick Douglass was black, and he also wrote articles about black rights on newspapers, and he yelled to a bunch of people about it, and was really good at it, I guess. He was a super famous abolitionist, and was also a former slave. He liked constellations. He also had really cool hair, and looked like Pepe Le Pew. Pew pew. Dred Scott was also black, and claimed he was a free man after his slave owner died because he lived on free land for many years. He pleaded to the Supreme Court, but lost, because they said he was still property and didn't have rights, which caused a huge mega butt ton of controversy. This guy had a cool beard and was also president. He led the U.S. during some hard times and gave some famous speeches and created documents about subjects from secession to slavery. After the Civil War, he got shot by John Wilkes Booth and died. Mr. Douglass was a senator and House member for Illinois. He ran for president in the 1860s against Lincoln and lost like a big fat loser. He was a senator and representative from Illinois, though, so that's cool. He was a large supporter of the Union during the Civil War, but died of typhoid fever a few weeks after it started like a big fat loser. Brown was a white dude that didn't really like slavery. He fought slavery in the Battle of the Battle of Backpack, the Battle of Rack Shack, the Battle of Black Jack. That's it. He was hanged for raiding Harper's Ferry, Virginia, along with others in 1859. This dude was president of the Confederacy during the Civil War and a former senator from Mississippi that loved slavery a lot. He tried to create a good reputation for himself while he was president for the world, so other countries would respect him, but instead made the Confederate dollar inflate and the Southern economy failed, so he wasn't that good. After he lost the Civil War, he went to prison for a few years. Then he posted bail and lived for a while before he died. My boy Jackson over here was a pretty cool war general, but he still wasn't as famous as Robert E. Lee. He also, surprisingly, wasn't actually a Stonewall. He didn't have a wife. He had multiple. He helped win many early battles and had very little sense of humor. He was a major general for the Union and raised a successful army in the early days of the war, but was accused of being incompetent because he couldn't beat this guy. He was fired by Lincoln for not meeting his standards of a good general and being a scaredy cat. Robert E. Lee was a great war general and shared many of the Union's ideas, but since he was Virginia and he didn't want to shoot up his own family, he joined the South. His army had the advantage at the beginning of the Civil War, but he mucked it up and ended up surrendering in 1865. This guy studied under Samuel Morse, the inventor of the telegraph, and liked technology so much that he took a bunch of cool, beautiful, artsy photographs and became super famous for it. As a kid, David Farragut was like, I like ships. So he followed his dreams and became Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Navy during the Civil War, and a bunch of other things. He is most well known from when he said, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead, at the Battle of Mobile. Bay. Clifford here served as a U.S. Army officer in the Seminole War and as a Confederate officer in the Civil War, but is pretty much known as the guy who lost and surrendered at the Battle of Vicksburg like a defeated person. Barton was a suffragist and Civil War nurse. She got proposed to 3 times, but never really married anyone. Clara is most famous for creating the Red Cross organization, which
Protects human life and health to ensure respect for all human beings and to prevent and alleviate human suffering.
it still helps people today, which is pretty cool. Belle Boyd was a spy. She helped the Southerners win an epic battle in Virginia by telling them information about the Union's army size, and she received the Southern Medal of Honor, which is like a poor man's Victoria Cross. She got wrecked by a heart attack and died in the 1900s at 56. He was an American hero of the Mexican War and a leading Union general in the Civil War. Plus, he created the Anaconda Plan, which was pretty much to surround the South and squeeze them in until they died. Much like how an anaconda kills its enemies by giving their prey a death hug and then eating their brains out. Old Snapping Turtle here was another Civil War general who was pretty good for the Union, but not as good as Ulysses S. Grant. But he beat Robert E. Lee at Gettysburg, which was nice, and helped the North win the war. This guy was a
Failure.
He tried to advance the Union at Gettysburg, but failed. The loss messed him up forever, and he remained bitter about it until he dropped dead at 50, which is a super long grudge when you think about it. Ulysses S. Grant was the best general, ever. He was the only general that Lincoln liked due to his aggressive strategies, and was one of the main reasons the North won the war. After the Civil War was over, he was well known as a war hero and made a transition to politics where he became a super cool president of the United States. Sherman was a really great Union general, but even though he was a Northerner, he still didn't appreciate
Negro equality.
He didn't even let them enroll to his armies. Due to Grant's break the South's will to fight mentality, William Sherman received orders to burn and destroy the towns of the Confederacy en route to the sea, which was super metal. Kearny was a slave, but then stopped being a slave after joining the all-African-American 54th Massachusetts Regiment during the Civil War. Him and his buddies fought really well at the Battle of Fort Wagner. They fought so well that they called it
Cool medals.
He was the first black person to ever receive this medal, furthering the end of racism. He also looks like James from Guess Who, so that's awesome. Philippe here was an immigrant who must have been super camera shy or unimportant or something, because not a lot of photos of him currently exist. Just like William Kearny, he was the first of a category to receive the Congressional Medal of Honor, except he wasn't black, he was Chilean. Lol. His gallant, heroic efforts in the battle for Fort Fisher were really nice, too. Johnny Wilkie was part of a family really famous for acting, and his skills on stage were really starting to get him some fame. That is, until he shot Abraham Lincoln in the head during a play to try and help the South even though the war was already over. This guy took Lincoln's place after Lincoln went into
Eternal slumber.
thanks to John Wilkes Booth, and he was one of the few crappy presidents that got impeached. The Republicans in the Senate and House voted for impeachment due to him not having a plan to protect former slaves, and he barely stayed president, being acquitted by only 1 vote. He was also a lone wolf since he had no vice president, which is really
lonely. I'm Mr. Lonely.
Harambe crazy, because he was the first African-American member of the U.S. Senate. Bonkers, I know. He was also a member of the African Methodist Episcopal Church and was a strong abolitionist, which is awesome too. His time serving as senator for Mississippi inspired many other African Americans to get interested into politics, which is great.